Welcome to the Stories Are Soul Food podcast with your hosts, Brian Cole and best-selling author, N.D. Wilson. This audio is brought to you by Cannonball Books and Great Homeschool Conventions.
So we're talking about movies.
Yeah.
Movies!
The Stories Are Soul Food. We're taking a brief hiatus in our trip through Nate's Magna Opera. Is that how we go? We pluralize magnum opuses.
Yes.
And we're going to take a break to talk about movies because we've had many people saying, but sure, we can do this for books, but how do you approach a movie as soul food? Are movies soul food?
A moving picture show. Do we need to say welcome to Stories of Soul Food? Have we started? Are we just going?
I think we're going right now.
We're going. The podcast has begun. Movies. Are movies soul food? Yeah. Stories are.
Yeah, right.
So
that's as is in our title.
Stories are soul food. Are movies stories?
It's
they
logic.
Are.
It's
Therefore,
yeah.
Movies are soul food. They're not as necessarily as potent. They're not as well. They're shorter.
Right.
It's a much shorter experience. It doesn't access every aspect of the imagination in the same way. You know, it kind of bypasses the imagination in a little bit. It can affect your imagination heavily after the fact. It can inspire the imagination, but it's not telling you a story via the imagination in the same way. So it does visual. Yeah, but a really well shot, well edited film is constantly engaging the imagination with things left unseen, with connectivity between frames, camera angles, etc. The imagination is engaged, but it's not engaged in the same way. The way a book and prose vicariously accesses the senses, a movie does not. You know, it kind of does. It has some workarounds. I like them a lot. I enjoy them a lot. I like to work with moving pictures, but it's definitely a different impact.
Because you've done a bunch of different projects, right? With movies.
I've been involved in different things, but it's and I love it. You know, it's really, really fun, but it is a completely different creative process, and it's a very different consumption experience, I think, as everybody knows. So, you know, when you turn the lights off and I'll sit there watching something together, eating ice cream or popcorn or whatever it is you do, it's a different thing. It's a different kind of transportation that happens. It is interesting in that it's shared. People respond differently, but there's still far more unity of experience.
Yeah, I think that's why so many people like us do the Friday night movie night or game night. You know, we vary some with that, but it does feel like there's a bit of a family bonding that can occur around. Of course, that happens regularly with books, but it's a fun event for the little kids.
Yeah, it is. And so when kids are talking about books they've read, and you know, one of the younger kids is reading a book that the older kids have already read, it's really, that conversation is fun.
Yeah.
You know, they're sharing something and, oh, have you met this character yet? And there's that kind of conversation going. That's great. It's enjoyable. But every imagination sees it differently. And so, and one of the examples I've used in rhetoric lectures at New St. Andrews over the years is describing a scene where you say, you know, Frodo and Sam are being chased down a hill by a pack of ravening orcs. Yeah, just some information there. It's not like it's enfleshed, and everybody is going to position the camera, meaning their own two eyeballs, in different places. Are they running towards you? Are they running away from you? How many orcs are there? 5, 6, 7, 50? Everybody starts to fill in details, and that is what happens in every single story. So, is Sam tripping? Is Frodo slightly ahead? Is Sam slightly ahead? What is it? And so in a book, you can't give exhaustive details for things like that. And you mustn't, as an author, try to, create a completely exhaustive scene. You have to let the imagination work. And so the imagination of a reader is constructing the background or leaving the background out of focus, doesn't know if it's sunny or if it's cloudy or if it's raining or whatever, or what kind of ground, the turf, the lumpiness of the ground, how tall is the grass, are there rocks, there's so much blank that we fill in. And that's one of the beauties of prose and reading a story, is you are co-creating as you read, and you're co-creating a lot of places where it's just left. It's left to you to do that. This is the case in scripture. This is the case in fiction. This is the case in...
And that's advice we often give as editors.
Yeah.
When you're editing something, as you say, you're showing too much.
Yeah, pull out
Yeah.
so much of this detail. Give us enough to make it feel real, then let the imagination work.
Right. The classic editing advice that 1 + 1 in fiction does not always equal 2. Usually 1 + 1 actually takes away from the value of a scene. When you throw too many details, it actually subtracts from the value of the scene.
Yep. But then you have in film, those shows and those movies with a deep level of commitment are the ones who are pushing the realism all the way into the back corners. And so we all know, or most people know, like, it's funny in this scene of Braveheart, you can look at the extras messing around in the background. Mel's in the foreground being deeply moved, and there's a couple of dudes like doinking around on the hilltop behind them.
They were bored
with play swords. They're just kind of messing around, and it's kind of out of focus, but it's back there. With movies, you have to sell it. You have to sell it in every single corner of every single set and every single little detail of the costuming. And we like that transportation, like transport me to a different time, transport me to a different place, and do the work for me. Show me what it's like. So the show Downton Abbey, for example, people are just absorbed with this experience of, man, this turning of the ages, this 1914 moment. It's so interesting to see how it really was. And of course, in a lot of ways, it's not accurate, but it's still, because they all have great teeth. But it is also communicating something very real, but it's doing it through a huge amount of meticulous work that pushes all the way out to the corners in every frame.
So when we're approaching a book, obviously the tool is word and the imagination.
Yeah.
What are the main tools of a movie? Like, speaking as a director or a screenwriter.
It's obviously sight, and sight and sound. So you're working off of two senses, and then insinuation and things that are left unseen that provoke the imagination and create engagement. But the strength of sympathy and affection and likability of a character and the character arcs, all those rules hold true,
right,
in both. So, I mean, film is a much easier reference point for me when I'm talking to people about stories, because people have seen so much more than they've read, which is unfortunate. But it is far easier to talk about Jurassic Park, the film, than it is to talk about Jurassic Park, the book.
Is that just because it's so much easier? Quicker?
Yeah, quicker reference points, but also more of a universal experience.
No, I mean, why do we watch so many movies?
Oh, because it's fun, Brian.
But I guess I'm just thinking through it, and I guess it is that time aspect. I have an hour and a half, and it's going to be bedtime. I could either work on a piece of a story, or I could
chip away. I could chip away on something, or I could consume something.
Well, what we found with the family movie night is that it's so hard to find enough movies to watch that are worthwhile. So we ended up doing more game nights because no one wants to watch anything. Or everyone does, but we don't know what to watch.
Clearly, you need to subscribe to VidAngel and ClearPlay.
There you go. Okay.
I'm guessing that you don't.
I subscribe to VidAngel. I just can't find the movies that I want on it.
Then subscribe to ClearPlay as well.
Okay, there we go. See, this is why we need this episode. What is ClearPlay? Let
me push filtration, movie filtration. ClearPlay is the older movie filtering service that's still copacetic with Disney and Fox movies.
Oh, okay.
So they will have a bit more.
Okay, gotcha.
And
because VidAngel has Netflix and
so
Amazon
I
Prime,
have both. I have both because and they have other stuff too on VidAngel. I have both because of the Venn diagram of their two libraries is not exact.
Right.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of overlap and there's also a fair amount with no overlap at all. And so I'll bounce into my VidAngel app and look to see, I keep a list of movies in my phone. Every time I think of one that's possible, I just immediately jot it down. So I have this long library of films that or shows that I'm trying to show my kids, or I'm like, oh, that'd be fun. And so I throw it down, and I'll look later to see if there's filters on it, or,
right.
decide whether to hold off or not.
Do you guys have did you guys do movie night, or do you just sometimes do it?
It's usually weekends.
Gotcha.
We'll try to find a spot on the weekend. If we're working on a show, which we just were with the first season of Downton Abbey, then it's 45 minutes. And so we can, sneak in a couple over the weekend. I think we did 3 this past weekend, Memorial Day weekend.
Nice.
Anyway, I try to find stuff that's interesting to diverse interests. I have children who are in it for the narrative 100%. And I have children who are in it for the historical observation and for the study, like the study of the art, meaning like just watching how these people recreated something, watching
Gotcha.
like how deep the research went, and picking up glimpses of another world. So I have kids who are tourists, and I have kids who are conceptual, and I have kids who are entirely narratively motivated. And so it's always kind of fun to try to find
something that scratches all those itches.
Things that are interesting to all of them.
What's the takeaway from Downton Abbey season 1 so far? What do you guys?
They're kind of over the soapiness. Like the kids are all there saying like, okay, this is interesting culturally. But my kids who are narratively motivated are just frustrated because they see the writers artificially extending tension.
Yeah.
Keeping, and this is nothing new, how to have people come from we hate each other to we love each other to we still just so deeply misunderstand each other. We just can't be together because we're taking turns misunderstanding.
Right.
Playing tennis with misunderstandings.
Is that 10 episodes?
That's 7. That first season. And they just trying to prolong it and stretch it. But everybody's enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But they're getting kind of over, their patience is being tried by some of the characters.
Yeah.
And by the writers. And, just come on.
Yeah.
So, especially Mr. Bates. Everybody loves Mr. Bates, but they're very tried by his false sense of dignity.
Okay.
It's refusal to answer accusations against him. Just like, come on, dude, just say it. And
good. Yeah. So that's the problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been really fun. And I think we won't just dive into season 2. It'll be a significant break because their tolerance for the soapiness has reached its end.
Yeah.
And so we'll watch something else, and we'll probably circle back to season 2. I doubt we'll ever get through the entire show. We dabble in shows that way, and we'll, do an early season, and and they've been very cracked up by it. So, The Last Kingdom, hilariously inaccurate historical show on.
Oh, right. I saw that
on Netflix, on VidAngels, filters on VidAngels. So you can really, you can get in there and tinker with it in VidAngel and make it palatable. But then same thing, you're kind of like, this formula for the season is it grows old. And this wuss of King Alfred, that also grows old when the historical, the actual historical story. So the variations annoy them, but that was another one that everybody enjoyed for a little bit.
Yeah.
And again, filtered.
Right. Yeah.
Filtered. So movie filtering is the ability to turn off scenes or words, for those of you who don't know. So you can go in and just say, yeah, we're turning off this word. We're skipping this scene.
Yeah.
So in my day, the parents would jump up and hold up a pillow.
Right.
And
mine as well.
Yeah. And now I can just say, we're skipping that. And of course,
and does it like mute it, or does it cut?
Both.
Does it? Okay.
So it mutes a curse word, or it skips a scene,
Mm-hmm.
And you can crank the knob all the way up and edit out things like in the film Elf, cotton-headed ninny muggins. I'm like, you know what? We're gonna leave in cotton-headed ninny muggins.
Yeah. Just because it's one of the most potent.
Yeah.
Potent insults you can.
So
get.
But that really has been fantastic for us because I've got a younger kid who can't consume what the older kids could safely consume, and I don't want them stuck watching cartoons. So if we're gonna have a family movie night, we're straddling, college age kids, then they're knocking on the door of getting out of the house, and then there's this elementary school kid who's still very young and very tender and very innocent, as she ought to be. It's like, how do we sit down and watch something together?
Yeah.
And, how do we experience these things together? So she's actually been able to watch things way beyond her tolerance or capacity because they've been, dad's edited version.
Because of the miracle of filtration.
Yeah. And so it's worth it to me to keep accounts with both VidAngel and ClearPlay, and it has enabled family movie night a great deal.
Yeah. So
because otherwise you can find yourself just consuming stupidity.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of Christian families who just consume total cotton candy brain rot.
Because it doesn't have something objectionable in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I find the lack of artistry, the lack of craft, the lack of creativity to be just as much brain rot as the little nasty soul rot that they sneak into more sophisticated films.
So there you go. To have good, high quality film, it's got to be on all three levels.
Yeah.
It can't be just morally unobjectionable.
And that's probably the biggest thing we could talk about with movies is that when people ask me, what should we watch? What should we watch? And I tell them there's often shock. There's shock and horror. And I'll be like, no, I filtered that. I don't worry about it. It's like, but that's so intense. I'm like, yep. Or that's such a, like, you watched Hotel Rwanda with your kids?
Oh, yeah.
Like, yeah, I did. Even with my youngest, we did. And, we wanted to. And that was one of those ones where it's like, okay, kids, buckle up. And we're going to have a lot of conversation after this. This is a glimpse into a moment of recent history that is super disturbing.
Yeah.
And
Can you talk me through the violence checklist there? Because I think, obviously, the sexual aspects, people are a lot more familiar with the idea of we just cut it out. We don't do that. What about the violence? How did you sort through that question as a family?
So stuff that is, I would tell my kids what my grandfather would always tell my sisters and myself, which was, don't worry, the cameraman will save them.
Okay, so on one level, it's not real.
Yeah, on one level, we're going to remove the art. However, in this case, that story in particular, it is very real. It just isn't, you're not watching the real.
Right.
You're watching a reenactment to communicate to you how awful it was.
And it's awful. That movie is
it's heartbreaking.
You can't forget. Yeah.
Yep. And so, but we have ties to Rwanda, and my wife's side, her uncle died in Rwanda, and it's like, we're going to watch this story. That was like, we also, and here little things, like we watched it on a Sunday afternoon. I decided this is going to be a daytime watch. Like we're going to watch this when the sun is shining outside. We're not going to like go do a nighttime watch right before bed.
And then go to bed. Yeah. After having watched Genocide.
Yeah. We're going to watch this movie. We're going to talk about this movie. We're going to have hours to process this movie. And then we're going to move on, and kids can read other stuff. And,
right.
And so it's that kind of decision. Like this is a daytime watch.
So contrast the violence in Hotel Rwanda with something like the John Wick trilogy.
Yeah. So we haven't done that because what's the point?
Right.
What's the upside?
Yeah. You get to watch a fun creation. Well, I don't even know if fun's the word. You get a movie that for some reason has become a cult classic.
Yeah. You get to watch something creative. Here's a version of that. So here's something kind of John Wickish. The film Nobody. It's a new film. We watched it with filters. I had watched it first for work, and then I thought, you know what, I can clean this up a little bit and watch this with my family. Same thing, Sunday afternoon watch, and it's entirely fictional, but there's something really bizarrely subversive going on in that film, and that I really enjoyed. And so afterwards, I quizzed my kids, like, what's the theme of the film? What's the film trying to say? What's going on here? Is it true? Is it false? How do you think it could have been improved? Like, where was it strong? Where was it weak?
Yeah.
And And it's very great. We all walked up from the basement and sit around the kitchen island and we talk about the film. And I cut some of the violence. Some of the violence that's just celebratory, like gratuitous, and is just there to make frat guys go, whoa, that kind of thing. That was trimmed out because it was not necessary for our purposes.
Yeah.
But, and not that I think, a college guy should have to turn it off or something like that. But it was a really interesting film and very, very well made. John Wick is like a video game movie, and it was just, haha, this is fun.
Yeah.
Nobody's more sophisticated. It's a more sophisticated version, but it doesn't feel that much more sophisticated at first glance. There's more going on there than people realize.
So what do you say to parents who say, but I don't know what to say after I watch that movie?
Work at it. Get better at it.
Yeah.
Chesterton said anything worth doing is worth doing badly. In other words, you can't be great your first try.
Right.
So figure it out.
And
do a little bit of research, read a review, or go bounce around, check out what other people have said or what other people, I do this all the time for almost every film. It's like, okay, there's my own engagement with this, but then also there's the impressions and the thoughts of people that I respect, or I'm all the time shown something that I missed. Like, oh, interesting. Right. I totally missed that.
I don't understand how some people do have that feeling of, I'm watching a movie in isolation and I have to have all the right answers right now. And then when my 8-year-old asks me a question, it's like, you'll watch somebody not know what to say, where if the 8-year-old had watched it in any other context, hey, is it okay for someone to talk to their parents like that? You would have known exactly what to say if you'd run into that at the pool, or should you be friends with that? It seems like people give up on themselves far too quickly with film. They think,
they do. Yeah. That's beyond me. Or they just say, we think filtering's stupid. And it's really, they don't want to pay the $5 a month or whatever it is, but they're like,
right.
It's those parts are the funny parts. Why would we cut the funniest parts? Or, it's just not that important to me. I want my kids to see this. And it's like, well, I actually, as my kids have gotten older, my older kids, I don't filter it the way I would for a 10-year-old. And I do it I am intentionally let stuff through that they need to have a resistance to. They actually need to be able to have it hit them and dismiss it and shrug it off. If I tried to have them all watch G-rated versions of everything until they were adults, they'd be completely vulnerable to the world.
Yeah.
They have to build up tolerances. So if we're watching with their little sister, I'm going to, it'll be set to her tolerances. But with them, it actually they have to grow. They have to be able to watch. They have to be able to watch it and deal with it. And not some of it you just turn off. It's not like I'm letting everything through. I'm talking about language mostly. Yeah. Or language and themes, as opposed to sex scenes.
Right.
But, it is really, really interesting to me how quickly people give up, and they'll say, more often than not, you'll have a lot of parents who'll give up because they say, I just am not up to that level of engagement. But others will give up and say, well, we don't really care. It's just for fun. We just turn our brains off.
I think laziness is way more, because that's what I say. I say, I forgot it's movie night and I forgot to sign up for VidAngel, and I don't know how to connect with the Apple TV yet. So, I'm gonna kind of scrunch my eyes when that swear word I forgot about popped through that that movie. And I think that's the laziness of the parent.
Yeah, the parent. Of the parent. So you have, there's reasons why. There's other times where I look at a film and I'm like, okay, it's not on Clear Play, it's not on VidAngel, and I'll go read up and be like, okay, what exactly would I be letting through?
Yeah, that's the only time screenit.com has been useful.
Yeah. And and even IMDb, I usually just jump to the Parents Guide in IMDb or Common Sense Media.
Yeah.
And we'll look at it and be like, okay, not yet. Or actually, we're gonna do this.
Yeah.
We can do this. I think Woman in Gold was one where we just watched it. And there was some language, but it was something I was prepared for. And I also talked to my youngest beforehand. It's like, okay, so there's going to be some stuff in here that you may not repeat.
Right.
People who are going to misbehave, and that's great. But we don't do that all the time.
Right. Yeah, it's all about whether you're acclimatizing to something bad, or whether you're encountering something bad. Say what my kids would encounter if they play with the neighbor kids.
Yep, exactly. And do you have an immune system at all?
Yeah.
When you play with the neighbor kids, do you immediately do you flee as the oversensitive, overly pure Sunday school kid, or can you actually shrug it off and have a conversation about it and not be super intimidated?
Right.
I was really in terms of filtering, I was extremely grateful that we could all watch Stranger Things. You know, like this is because I was able to like show my kids an intense, nostalgic show that the world was talking about and that many things were imitating, and I was not opting them out into an ivory tower.
Yeah.
They were able to engage with it and engage with it to friends and engage with it in the culture because they were able to experience it, and they would not have been able to. My older kids would have been fine, but they would not have been able to with their little sister in the room. It's like,
right.
But we were able to chip away at it with the whole family together and talking about it, eating pizza and watching 2 episodes and moving on. And we talked about even the concept of the binge watch and this, just this show's role in creating the binge watch. And so a lot of conversations about story, character, and even just the culture at large and current visual media product. So talking through it, wondering things, researching things is all very, very important. Trying to make them perfectly clean is a mistake. You want to be like pushing your kids' tolerances a little bit. You want them to be growing.
Now that's interesting. I think a lot of parents would say, hey, if I can make this completely unobjectionable so we could enjoy it together at the push of a button, wouldn't you?
No.
And is that just because
soul food? We're talking about soul food here. We're talking about making people stronger. And so there's a degree to which interaction with vicarious darkness, like darkness by proxy, things that they have to think through or process and push against. Something we've said throughout this podcast is we're talking about catechizing loyalties and loves. So if it's stuff that is celebrating, glorifying effectively, like really well-crafted glorification of vice, then no, don't watch it. And just filtering it's not going to help.
Right.
That's going to be in the bones of the thing. So that's not what you're trying to do. But you are trying to feed their loyalties and feed their loves and give them an opportunity to resist. Like give them enemies at their frame. Give them things to criticize. I watch movies with my kids just as much to give them opportunities to hate stuff and dislike stuff as I do to give them opportunities to love stuff.
Do you have a great example for a movie for, I guess, a little bit younger? What is one of your first hate movies that are good to watch?
Well, so it's less about, we don't do hate movies as in like, let's watch something terrible just to hate on the craft.
Right.
We do stuff where it's like, okay, there's going to be a character in here. There's going to be a struggle here where you're going to be very frustrated by choices characters make. And you could be frustrated by the choices the director makes and by what the director tries to do. So actually here, this will tell you, No Country for Old Men.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. And yes, my youngest has watched it.
Wow.
So, and she was 10 when she watched it.
Okay.
And we talked through all the different...
With filtration.
We talked through all the different ways that my kids would have changed the narrative and the structure of the narrative and particular scenes. And there's the other thing that's great is there's disagreement in my family on it. And it came up the other day and they were still arguing about whether a particular sequence should have been off camera or on camera. The Coen brothers decided to have it be off camera. And so, my daughter's advocating of how that would have been more potent if there'd at least been something on camera. There's still debate in the family over the last scene, what the directors are saying and what would be stronger, what would be better, what they would prefer, what would make it a better film. But it's in, one of my most critical kids who has the most thoughts on how that film should be changed slightly. It's still in her top 3. It's still up there in terms of the craft, the construction, everything else. And I love what it's done to her own creativity and the way she thinks through it and what she wants, how she would resist it and shift things. So, it's a that's an example. And it wasn't hate. There's things to hate in that film. And there's things to hate in that film that the directors want you to hate. And you can say, yep, sign me up for hating that.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's great. But there's other things in there that you can really admire. Like, wow, this is a well-told story. And I wish it was a little better told in the bullseye they were aiming at, not in their execution.
Right.
They're hitting the target. They're hitting the target they're aiming at. Should they be aiming at a slightly different target? And that's the discussion. And then you bounce over to something like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And it's just a romp and hilarity, and everybody enjoys it, and they all sing the songs, and it's super funny. And we talk about imitating other stories in the Odyssey and things like that. So there's stuff that's just for fun, and there's stuff that we've watched where I'm expecting them to feel pushed by it and have to react to it and to have to push back and have their own perspective on it. And I couldn't do this without Clear Play and VidAngel. It's not, and I couldn't even do it without both of them. Yeah. I wander back and forth through the libraries of both. And there's still a ton of stuff. And I have acquaintances and friends in both of those companies. And, I'm so incredibly grateful that they're still out there trying to do it,
because they were almost didn't Disney get quite upset with them?
Yeah, not with ClearPlay. ClearPlay does it differently, and VidAngel did get stomped on, and it was sad, but they've survived. They've come through, but they don't have Disney films, and so if you want something from Disney, you bounce over to ClearPlay.
Gotcha.
But anyway, as far as it goes, a film is a form of tourism. It's seeing a time and a place and a character that either did exist, didn't exist, never existed. Yeah. Like there's all these different variations, but you're constructing a weird hiatus, a vacation. And you're at this touristic moment. And so you have movies that are vice tourism, shows that are vice tourism. Like, hey, we're going to take you into a place where you can pretend that you're a horrible, horrible person, and you can get the kind of vicarious glee of being a horrible, horrible person without any of the long-term taint.
Except surprise.
Except for surprise. It shaped your imagination and it cultivated your loves and loyalties in the wrong direction.
Here's to you, Breaking Bad.
Yeah, there you go. Cheers, Breaking Bad. Vice tourism. And I'm not saying it's badly made or the craft is poor, because craft competence is incredibly high. But it's vice tourism. And then you also have a true escapism where, let's have some bubble gum.
Yeah.
Let's go on this touristic experience through a completely imaginary version of Santa Barbara, which is actually filmed in Vancouver, and we're going to call it Psych. And it's all Chipper Charlie and everything's fun, and and that there's a place for that.
But be aware of it. Aware of it.
Yeah, be aware. Okay, this is bubblegum, goofy, fun time. This is like reading Far Side comics or Calvin and Hobbes, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it is something wrong if that's your diet, if that's your full diet. That's
people and movies people are so quick to, if you attack a movie for one thing, they're so quick to say, but no, it's not this other thing. And I feel like there's so much goalpost moving with movies. Yes. So you try to critique Breaking Bad for something, for example.
Oh, no, you don't understand what it was trying to accomplish.
Right. And you say, no, I do.
I do. And I think that was a bad decision. And I think less of them for trying to accomplish that.
Yeah. Right.
And so that you have all these different layers where you can criticize something. You can criticize something on a craft competence level. You can criticize something on its fundamental loyalties, like the actual moral framework or the lack of a moral framework. And you can criticize something for being too G-rated bubblegum. And you can criticize something for aiming at the wrong target.
Yeah.
Like you aimed at a target you shouldn't have aimed at, but guess what? You hit it. Well done, you. You did an amazing job, and I wish you hadn't aimed at that.
Should we talk about Christian films now, or are we out of time?
Yeah, no, we can do that. We were going to do a double episode. We can come back. I've got a little bit of time.
Okay.
So we're not canceling yet. Let's talk about Christian movies.
Okay. Because I think
what's to say?
Yeah, how specific do we get? How fast?
So here's a question: is Children of Men a Christian movie?
Okay, so we're talking the P.D. James novel, right? Wait.
Yeah, we're talking about the Clive Owen film.
Right.
Is it a Christian movie?
No one would say yes. as far as the level of theme is concerned. So it's your genre market distinction that we're talking about here.
We're actually going right back to the YA question.
Yes.
Of what is YA? And it's actually a market, not a genre.
Right.
So is Christian, in scare quotes, in front of a movie, is that a market? Are we talking about a market? Are we talking about a genre? What are we talking about?
We're definitely talking market.
We're talking market for sure.
Yep. You're trying to sell to people who will buy things with Christian in front of it.
Yes, exactly. And there's rules for that. There's rules for that market. Yep. And
those rules go from what is in movies go all the way up to movie or music. What notes are allowed in these songs, right?
Yeah, Christian. We put Christian in front of this, which means we need a Christian housewife on a knee jerk to feel safe acquiring it to consume on behalf of the household. Because overwhelmingly, the mom makes the cultural consumption choices in America, and especially in the church. So mom is the one saying it's movie night and this is what we're watching. Mom is the one saying this is the music that's allowed in the house. That's overwhelmingly the case. And actually, I have a bunch of friends in marketing and broad secular marketing and Christian marketing, and they talk exactly about how you have to market in the Christian world to that woman. Like, that is the woman you have to sell. And if you can get her, if you can get that 35-year-old woman, then you've got the whole family. And if you can't, it doesn't matter if you get the dad. It doesn't matter if you get the teenage son to want to watch it. It's not going to happen, or it's going to happen on the sly at the bus stop on a phone. You know, like that's So, you know, you're going in the Christian market, you're going after a 35-year-old mom.
Yeah. Okay. And that's why movies
and now to justify and defend that 35-year-old mom, the world is full of filth. And so she's looking for something that she can trust, and she can trust quickly.
Right.
Like, what can I trust quickly? And so that Christian tag is really, really important in the market for somebody who lives a busy life and is trying to have a movie night with their family. And
because that means it has been clear played and vid-angeled already.
Right. Yeah. And in every way. I wish there was a filter for schlock.
Right. No, yeah, that's for sure. There's nothing wrong with trying to remove objectionable things, but there is something wrong with always serving pablum to your kids' imagination.
Now, to flip it over, and this is something that is very important to me. If everybody listening to this hears the phrase Christian art, I would assume that your knee-jerk reaction is going to be, if I said one word reaction, first word reaction to Christian art, it's going to be cheesy, schlock.
Ew.
Yeah, ew, gooey. Or it's going to be like a warm blanket. Yeah. You know, it's something comforting. It's affirming.
Cocoa, for sure.
Yeah, it's hot chocolate and marshmallows.
Right.
And as much as I like hot chocolate and marshmallows, that's not really what you want in all of your art. But we have to broaden our categories. Go back in the history of Christian art and include Shakespeare, include Handel.
Robinson Crusoe.
Yeah, Crusoe. Include, you know, the entire history of the novel and drama and Christian creators, Christian authors. You have to include Lewis. You have to include Tolkien. You have to include all these authors and writers, like my own stuff. I'm a Christian.
Yep. N.D. Wilson.
I write stories.
Graham Greene.
Yeah.
Flannery O'Connor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, wait, are we still cheesy? Like, no, when we say Christian art, what we mean is stuff produced by the gospel industrial complex for a particular market and marketed a certain way right now in the immediate past.
That's what that means.
For the last couple of decades. That's what it means.
The moral majority is something that is targeted for the moral majority.
And it's really since the 70s. It's not even, you know, a long time. So we're talking about when people think cheesy, they think Christian art since the 70s. And even then you have to discount a lot of it. You have to discount a lot of Christian creators, a lot of Christian stuff, because they weren't in that market. They weren't market tagged. So we have to get bigger and we have to get bolder and less insecure about Christian art, because Christians have been winning the art game for a very long time.
Yeah.
Even you go back to the Dutch masters, you know, in painting, you know, we're talking about a real high point in Christian art.
Protestants.
Yeah. And then now in film, it's like, okay, so Terrence Malick, Christian director? Like, no, we think Kendrick brothers, right?
Yeah.
and it's not that you would approve of everything Terrence Malick does, but he is definitely on a mission.
And trying to do something real, trying to really give you something to think about how life works.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
whereas War Room, I don't know that it is. It feels like it's that reduction conversation where War Room is trying to say, hey, prayer is a good thing.
Sure. And then this is where I defend, now I flip around and I defend things like War Room. And I say, okay, so if you think about the history of film in the US and how long the secular side has been practicing and what the budgets they're allowed to work with, and then you say, now let's give, maybe a church in Texas $400,000 and see what they can do. Can you compete?
Now, as far as budgets go, that's like minuscule, right?
Yeah, it's non-existent. And so and even if you get up to a couple millions and you get up under 10 million and you're still talking about tiny, tiny budgets. And you also are pulling from actors who are unknown or willing to be, they're either believers, they're members of a church, very little experience.
Or they're desperate for work.
Yep, right? Exactly.
Okay.
For a reason. And so you have...
But these movies make incredible amounts of money, don't
sometimes, they? Yeah, sometimes they do. But then you have to realize that they are owned by the same secular studio that owns the other movies. And so like Christian, in scare quotes, is a market, and they will harvest. Let's just put it this way. If you make $80 million off of Fireproof, is the studio going to give you $80 million to work on your next film? And the answer is no.
Will they just give you the whatever?
Three to five.
They'll give you the 3 to 5 to do it again.
You might, as you get more and more successful, you could get 10 to 20. You could start to grow. But will you get Maze Runner money? Of course not. Will you get Hunger Games money?
Why not?
Absolutely
Is
not.
that because they just view it as so market? It's like, this is our romance movie. They view it the same as like, hey, this is how we make a romance, or this is the same as we make a horror movie.
No, they do it. They do it by rote. They have plug and chug, but also there's diminishing returns. And this is something Christians have to get better at. It's because they won't make more money with a bigger budget, because the marketplace, the demographic that comes out to support them, whether or not it's cheesy. Like, so if you can get Christian America to go watch the movie without spending that money, why would you spend that money? So it's tough. And I know a lot of different Christian filmmakers and people involved in, the quote unquote faith market, and they're working hard to make the best stuff they can. And I'm not going to knock that. It's like they're doing what they can. And I might aim at a different target, or I might really desire for it to be have less whipped cream, less sugar, and a little more realism. But they're doing what they can with what they've been given.
Yeah. And
they're growing and improving, and the budgets of those films have gone up significantly. They're growing significantly, the impact, and studios are starting to pay a little more attention and realizing that more investment, can bear fruit. But Christians think Christian publishing, Christian studios, no one is willing or able to spend the kind of money that is necessary to make great films in that market.
Okay.
They're just not. And so so
it's not like there's a million really high quality people just sitting ready to go, trying to bust their butts to come up with the money to make these projects.
Right.
They're part of the treadmill almost.
Yeah. But then you also have people who've been burned. So you have, you get sold a bill of goods about, hey, if you invest $20 million, you're going to make so much money, yada, yada, yada. And then they just throw it down the wormhole and it's gone forever. And so that guy's not investing again, like never.
Right.
He's never putting money into a movie again. And he was willing to take that risk. You look at what Phil Anschutz did with Walden Media, and he came in for billions and struggled and struggled and struggled and struggled. It just didn't work. Different people have tried it, and they go, and it leaves a mark culturally, but it's hard to get a return without a deep and lasting commitment to making a lot of them. And, many, 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 and having many, many failures. You can't actually...
Do most movies fail to make money, or how does that work?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, same as books. Very, very, very few books are bestsellers.
Right.
Like true bestsellers, not just, self-congratulatory bestsellers or whatever. Very few books are. And there's a lot of There's a lot of people who claim bestseller as soon as they're on an Amazon list.
Right.
There's a lot of those Amazon lists.
Which if you just release on a Friday, you can get on one of those Amazon lists.
Yeah, I've been on so many of those obscure lists that I didn't even know existed.
That's all right. You are a bestseller.
I'm a best-selling author in the category of boy's life or like whatever.
I think we got in one once for obscure theological topics because not many people are publishing in there. But we're not complaining about that.
Yeah, it's like awesome. And it's great, but it's also really, really funny. So if you think about Warner Brothers having been around for as long as they've been around and the shots they're taking and, the ability to keep taking shots and keep taking shots and keep taking shots. And you think about that, what we end up with in the Christian world is one shot and you have to hit, and if you don't hit, all your investors are out and they're never doing this again.
So that's why they don't try anything risky.
Yeah. And so you have to be in the middle of the road. You have to be as safe as possible. You need that 35-year-old mom to say, this is the movie for this weekend. Right. You need to not take risks. Now, I know there's a bunch of Christian creators who are taking risks and who are pushing to make bigger and better stuff. And that's awesome. But it's going to take a bit. It's brand new. Think about how long it took the secular world to get there. It took a minute before they could get to high craft.
Since the 30s. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah, even earlier. And it's taken a bit. And so we have to be patient. And we have to keep grinding. But also, you and your kids need to be watching stuff that is not just middle of the road safe. You need to be watching stuff that's not just, sugar. It's not just cotton candy because I want to feel safe. Just sit down with my family and not have to worry at all. And it's going to be some Sunday school theme. You need to get outside of that. Watch some movies that some minor prophets would watch.
Oh, wow. I like it.
With filters.
Right. Yeah, with that, I think we need to stop thinking that filming is or watching film is just educational. Or just entertainment.
Entertainment. It's not just entertainment. It's not just inspiration.
We're trying to grow people.
Yep. And so, that's the same task as when you pick a book.
Right.
So you're trying to grow people. It's soul food. You want them to grow stronger.
You can't compromise on that. And as much as we like the lesson of Fireproof, don't do porn.
Yeah.
A fantastic
message. We also like the lesson of not being scared to grab a couple $100,000 and try to make a movie with your friends from church. I've tried that. Yeah. It's super fun and it's important. It actually is important, but you need to be thinking about growing your kids stronger, inspiring them and ingraining their loves and loyalties, catechizing their loves and loyalties the same way you do with books and stories at all. What's the point of movie night with the family? Unity, loyalty, and growing stronger. Yeah. Growing stronger as people.
Yeah.
And there you go. So watch movies, subscribe to both ClearPlay and VidAngel.
I'm halfway there. Suck it up. I'm halfway there. Some of you are probably all the way there, but
suck it up. Pay the money. Pay the money. It is a small price to pay to keep companies like that going. So go for it.
Thanks for listening to this week's edition of the Stories Are Soul Food podcast. If you're someone highly invested in kid fiction and finding the best stories for your kids and you haven't downloaded the Canon app, I want to encourage you to download and subscribe today. You can find things on there such as Christine Cohen's The Winter King, Ethan Nicole's Brave Ollie Possum, Peter Lightheart's Wise Words, a book on Narnia from Douglas Wilson titled What I Learned in Narnia, and much, much more. Download the app today wherever you get your apps and subscribe.